back to the Veterans in Politics candidate interviews for the Nevada State Assembly. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ron Q for Clark County Treasurer, Michael Broadway Real Estate, Real Water, and the Lakeside Business Suites. My name is Alexis Plunkett. I'm a Nevada criminal defense attorney. Here we are about to do Nevada State Assembly District 4, Kenneth Rezendes, and I would like to give the panel an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Mantis Toboggan. Hi, I'm Mantis Toboggan, and I am the Veterans in Politics radio co-host.
Robert Foust, US Army. Geraldi US Marine.
Thank you, panel. And now I'd like to give Mr. Rezendes an opportunity to introduce himself and tell us about your background in about a minute.
My name is Kenneth Rezendes. I've been in Las Vegas, Nevada since 1964. Was raised here, moved here from Baltimore, Maryland when I was 3 years old. I'm a small business owner. I've owned my business for the last 22 years and have been involved in Nevada through volunteer organizations, serving in the community and through my business my whole life. I'm married. I have 2 children. My daughter just graduated from college from BYU, Idaho. My son currently has a year left and is studying Spanish and a minor in international relations and business. And recently was married January 6th.
I'd like to turn it over to the panel for questioning.
Go ahead. Jay Geraldi.
What is your position? That's not good.
What is your position on the First Amendment as far as free speech, and more so in regards to offensive speech or what is considered, some may consider hate speech depending on what group you're speaking with? Are you for regulating hate speech, and if so, why or why not?
You know, it's an interesting question. Because of the fact that the First Amendment gives us those freedoms, do I think people incite trouble, and do I think we can create problems through our speech? Absolutely. I think a lot of it, though, has to come back to free speech in the aspect of how we raise our children and what we accept as a society. When society accepts videos and movies and games that encourage this type of behavior, it's hard to go against a trend that is found to be acceptable. Would I regulate it? The Constitution gives us that freedom. I would just hope that as a society we could more appropriately teach what's acceptable and not what isn't.
Robert Foust, could you tell us a little bit about your district, and what do you think is the biggest problem in your district, and what are you going to do to solve it?
Okay, so I've lived in my district. Actually, District 4 has been realigned several times. I've lived in the northwest part of the community for the last 35 years. In reality, I grew up at Smoke Ranch in Decatur, and have lived there for 53 of the 40 years that I've been in Nevada. So I know the area tremendously well. The demographics of it changed tremendously. The needs in our area with the economy thriving as it currently is, it's changed. We had tremendous foreclosures in our area. In fact, our area was one of the highest areas of foreclosures and loss of homes. And I've had several friends who have gone through losing their home when the economy dropped. The strength of our economy right now and everything moving forward, the real needs in our district are representation. There's someone fighting for the district for the things that need to be done, not only for our district, but for our state. And when we look at the district as a whole, businesses are growing. We're probably one of the quickest growing areas there is. We've got a new spaghetti bowl coming, and that's going to be accomplished because of the fuel indexing tax that was passed last time. But if you look at that spaghetti bowl, where it's going to be placed in the impact of traffic that we have out there, it's only going to create a greater growth out there. So we need to make sure that as we are allowing that growth, that it's controlled in the sense that we aren't going to have more problems with traffic and injuries. Education, that was the biggest issue in answer to your question. I went there indirectly because of that. Education is probably the biggest problem we have out there. And I think that's in our whole Clark County. Demographically, As far as party lines, it's almost flat even between Democrats and Republicans. The independents and nonpartisans will decide the race in our district this time.
Okay, Mantis Toboggan. Because we had such a high foreclosure rate, people who could afford to do so bought a lot of properties in Las Vegas, especially people from California. And now mortgage and interest and even rent is going up very quickly. Do you think that this will tremendously affect our homeless population, and what can we do to fight that?
I like that question, thank you. One of the things, and I'm going to take a roundabout answer to your question, okay? One of the things I've always wanted to try and get started, which is hard to do, is we currently have plenty of nonprofits in this town that serve our veterans and that serve our homeless population in the state. We also have several of different homeless situations where those organizations are abused, duplicating services or going in and taking advantage of it. What I would love to see happen is to be able to create a program that we can call these nonprofits together. And it's a platform that they can all sign into, but they're able to communicate one with another on the services that are provided to, whether it be veterans or homeless or the situation that it is. So benefits or the programs that are offering these services aren't being abused or duplicated. By doing so, if the organizations are communicating and talking, we're also going to network those organizations to help the services for the homeless. Now, back to your question about the housing. I think it's going to get a lot worse in the housing that's coming up because we've got the raiders coming into this town. And I'll bet you our population is going to boom like we haven't seen it, which is going to create a shortage for housing, which is going to create the problem of being of affordability. We have to do something to help them. Do I have an answer? No. Do I want to be at the table? Yes.
Robert Foust, where do you stand on transgender restrooms at the schools?
You know, it's interesting you would ask that question. My religious beliefs put me here on where my stance is. I believe that depending on what your gender is, that's the restroom you should use. And if I may add to that real quick, and I apologize, there's many who will disagree with me on that and think that...
I'm not one of them.
Okay, well, who think that I'm insensitive to it. You know, as a society, it's very simple. We love all people, but we have to think of both sides when we look at these issues, not one.
Geraldi, do you support banning semi-auto assault weapons?
No. Would you like me to go in more detail? Plain and simple, the Constitution gives us a right to bear arms. And I don't believe the right to bear arms is limited by the type of gun that you own. We're allowed to bear arms to protect ourselves from the tyranny of government, not our neighbors.
Okay, Mantis Toboggan again. Would you say that your stance on public restrooms is your most controversial? And if not, what is?
No, without a question it is. And I say that because of the fact that people think I'm insensitive or I don't care about those individuals. My niece is currently dating a transgender. And so it's not that I'm not educated or understanding to the issues, but when we're talking about this, we're talking about somebody who's using a restroom because they're uncomfortable in another restroom. But you're inverting that now. You're taking that individual and putting them into the restroom that they're going into. The people who they're going in with will be uncomfortable. So how do you take care of that? I don't know. But I look at it from a business standpoint and the fact that the cost to be able to create some of the situations for businesses to have to change to adjust to this is unfair to the business person.
Robert Foust, you know, I heard you mention religious, so I'm going to assume that you have some religious affiliation. Do you believe that politics and religion should be kept separate, separation of church and state? And would you vote against your religious conscience if the state so mandated through the Constitution?
Okay, so first off, I consider myself a religious person without a question. My values and my standards are extremely important, and they're actually what guide and direct my life. And when it comes to decisions and times to make choices, I'm going to make the decision that I think is best for my community and the best for my state. But my religious convictions, sometimes I can have a viewpoint that may not agree with you. And if it comes down to the point where the Constitution says I have to do this, I'm going to obey the laws of this country.
Sure, why not? Simply, Mantis Riley, simply where do you think we need most to increase funding? I think my mic went out.
Where do we need to increase funding? You know, before I can look at a budget and see where money is really spent, I can tell you that education has problems. And education is a platform of what I believe can change our state's economy. However, until we have transparency within the school district and know where funding is, I don't think you can put more money towards education until you can account for what's there. The reorganization that's been done with the school district and the money's going down to the school now should give us a better picture of where money is being spent. Now, mental health issues, without a question. Our state is massively underfunded in trying to help with mental health issues.
Do you think that ESAs will negatively affect which schools are funded?
You need to re-ask that question. I support ESAs if that's what you're asking me. I think parents and students should have a choice in their education, but I also believe very firmly that we need to change the way we educate in our state.
Robert Foust. So, you know, that was the question I was going to ask is mental health funding. So I'm going to pass it over to Joe for a second.
I answered that very clearly, didn't I?
did that.
Jay Geraldi, do you support or oppose redistricting, the voting, what's the proper word for it? Redistriction of the voting demographics, and why?
You know, it's gone on for years and it's been part of the political system, and we have what we call gerrymandering. In 2020, they'll look at the districts and realign again. The Supreme Court ruling was interesting in how they ruled on it, but this country has survived and existed within the frameworks that we have, and I think the Founding Fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, were inspired in how we should do it. Now, in answer to your question, the party that's in control gets to decide how that gets done, and I think there's an advantage, and that gerrymandering happens without a question. However, it's been a part of our political system for 200 years, and we've survived to become a great country through it.
Robert Faust. So where do you stand on the BLM and the control of BLM property, especially out in your district, because it is essential out there. There's quite a bit of it. So, you know, what I hear is that the federal government can afford to maintain the property and the state can't, and that's the benefit of having the federal government for the BLM. Where do you stand on that?
Call me ignorant in this subject, and I say that because of the fact I don't know we have to maintain vacant land that's being looked over. I think the state should have control of that land.
Well, there is. We're not supposed to debate, so. But I'm going to say that there is maintenance that goes on with that land.
Oh, there's no question that there is. I understand that. But for all the acreage we have in our state, a majority of that isn't touched. But I think that the state should have control of that land.
Okay, Mantis Toboggan, and where do you think we could best cut funding?
I don't have an answer to that because I have not scoured the budget to see where all the funding goes to. But I can tell you that 20% of our state budget goes to education. I would love accountability there.
Do you think there's a large disparity in funding for different schools?
You know, it's interesting because the formula that they use for how funding is divided among schools, if you look at it, some school districts receive as much as $20,000 per kids, and other schools receive as little as $5,000. And then you have Title I Hope. My wife works for the Clark County School District as an office manager. And with the new budgets and how they're doing the numbers, I can tell you that I sat on the SOT committee the first year as a business leader to help with that. And I can tell you right now that numbers didn't match up. That accountability, I keep using that word to you, but if we don't have accountability and know where the funding's going to, we need to ask why.
Robert Foust, if somebody was to support or present a bill in the state assembly that would defund school sports, would you vote for or against it, and why?
No, I would not. And the reason being is we have seen a decline in our education system in this state, in Clark County, since 1975. And what's happened in our schools is we have seen the specials taken away. We don't have vocational opportunities in the high school like we used to. We have CTE, which is career and technical education, but the majority of those are all college-bound designed educations. We don't have the trades. We don't have carpentry. We don't have auto shop. We don't have woodworks. We don't have any of those things being taught in our schools anymore. And look at the dropout rate in our high school, which has happened from the 80s, and as we've taken those specials and those things away, to take away sports, we're going to lose more kids. We can't do that. We need to have an educated and a hireable workforce in this state. The reality of it is we need to expand how we educate and give students and parents an opportunity to have a choice in their education, whether it's vocational, career, or an advanced diploma.
Jay Geraldi, do you support allowing the school down to the individual as far as the school itself, whether it's a public or charter, to have more discretion in leading how they educate their students?
Absolutely. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't believe the Department of Education and the government should exist. I think the state should be the one who choose how we educate, and I think that the schools need to have the freedom. We have some amazing teachers in this district, amazing. I put 2 kids through this school district. I was very fortunate, I was a very involved parent, my wife and I both, and my kids thrived, they did tremendously well. But the number one indicator of the success of a student is going to be parental involvement. And so, but when you throw in Common Core, which I'll tell you right now, I hate it. You're putting a square peg in a round hole. We need to let teachers teach the way they know how. You may be a learner by book, you may be a learner by visual, and you may be a learner by hands-on. And teachers see and understand that. When we tell teachers how they have to teach, we're taking away their ability to teach.
Robert Faust. I'd like to debate with you, but I know we can't. On mental health, do you think that maybe we should get more facilities that would actually house people and keep them in and take care of them and keep them off of the streets?
I think it'd be wonderful. I'll give you an example. I've got, on my wife's side of the family, we have a young man who served tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's her nephew, her cousin, and he suffers from PTSD. And it's severe. He hasn't worked since he's come home. I have my brother-in-law who's currently going through cancer, pancreatic cancer, and he's having to use the VA. And he works at the VA here. And one of the first problems we have is what the doctors get paid at the VA. It's significantly less. We can't keep good doctors in the VA to be able to give continued great provided services because of what they're being paid. And we have to be able to help not just veterans, but mental health in our state. We have to be able to put ourselves in a situation to be able to take care of them. If that means more facilities, then we need to find a way to do it.
Would you support the privatization of the Veterans Administration? There's a good question.
You know,
Sideway.
because I was gonna say my initial my initial answer to that would be no. And the reason why I say that, the only reason why I say it initially, is because of the fact that I see the privatization of what we, I'm an insurance agent, okay? And there's a lot of benefits to it, but you look at what happened with Obamacare and the things that exist within that healthcare, or the cost that skyrocketed. I think there's a lot of benefits to privatization as well, though, because I think the government's handprint on everything slows down real services. So I just talked myself in a circle to your answer.
Yeah.
I really did, didn't I? I have not looked at it enough, but I'll be honest with you. I consider myself what I call a 40-60 person. 60% of my views are very strong, and I've got very strong opinions. But I keep 40% of my mind open to be educated, taught, and to be able to discuss that. And that's what I think we need to be. If we made up our mind before we ever get somewhere, that's not representation. Representation is coming to the table and coming together and finding the right answer for things, not standing on a stone and saying this is the only thing I'll do.
Okay, Mantis to mine again, and just for the record, I would like to state that I feel our VA services in Nevada are absolutely spectacular, but.
Agreed. They
Okay.
are. I would just like to see those doctors stay longer and be able to keep those doctors. Because when you get care started,
You don't want to see a doctor every time you go to the VA?
not a different doctor.
Yeah.
If I have a doctor who takes care of my care, and suddenly, oh, he left, he got a better paying job. Oh, we lost this one, and we have to start that care over because the doctors have to keep looking back over it. That's what I'm talking about. My brother-in-law is a perfect example right now. He's in the middle of chemo. He will be till September. If he loses his doctor, that chemo will continue. The treatments will continue. However, the doctor's gonna have to relook over his file and start from the beginning with him on understanding him. That's why I'm saying what we missed in the VA. We've got an amazing VA hospital here. It's probably one of the best in the country. I hope I didn't imply otherwise.
No, absolutely. My question back to education. We do have some really good technical high schools. Southwest and Southeast Career and Technical Academies are fantastic, but they're also funded by Apple, Adobe, a lot of different companies fund our high schools that are technical. Do you think that we need to put more funding into those schools ourselves? Or should we just rely on that?
You're leading me in my campaign platform, in all honesty, in what you're asking, okay? Let me start by saying my son went to Northwest Career and Technical. He was the first 4-year class that was there. The teachers at these schools are unbelievable because they aren't just educated to be teachers. He had nurses, he had doctors, he had people who literally were in the profession who now became certified to be teachers teaching in those schools. And he got an education that I think was far beyond a standard high school. And I can tell you why I say that. At the end of his first year of college at BYU, at the end of his first year, he said, "Dad, you know how they say elementary school prepares us for junior high school?" And it doesn't. And junior high school prepares us for high school, and it doesn't. And high school prepares us for college? I said, yes. He says, well, it did. And I said, well, that's good. He goes, no, you don't understand. I've got friends who were valedictorians and graduated high honors at Palo and Arbor and Centennial and all these schools who were failing out up here. He was thriving. And it's because they taught him how to study. They gave him a great education, and he was prepared for college. Answer to your question. My platform, what I would love to see happen is co-op with businesses within our community and the vocational and the educations to be able to teach those classes and have kids prepared when they get out of high school if they choose not to go on to colleges. That funding, when you co-op with it, you're allowed to, I would like to see tax credits given to these businesses that are working with our district. Because if we work properly with businesses within the community, they're gonna have a hireable workforce. And guess what? We're now having a school district that has lower dropout, and we're also gonna have a school district that has an employable workforce, and will bring business to our state. And that's how we diversify our economy.
I'm going to have one final question. Robert Foust, would you rather have driver's education in high schools or a baseball team?
I'm an insurance agent, that's unfair. I would rather have baseball, okay? And the reason for it, there are programs out there like Driver's Edge. My kids went to it. It stopped my son from rolling a vehicle when he was involved in an accident 3 years ago. It's funded by the programs, not from our state, but it's one of the greatest programs in the world for youth. It counts for their education. Our state laws right now require kids to have X amount of hours before they can get their license. So how we do it now versus how I did it and you and I did it in high school are two different things.
Well, I went to high school a little before you.
I'm a lot older than you think I am, Robert.
I think that'll conclude it.
At this point, we would like to give the candidate about a minute to say why you would like to have the Veterans in Politics endorsement.
Yeah, I want to start by saying, I was raised with a family of 5 children, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. My mother divorced my father when I was 3 years old and we moved here. But my great-grandfather was Vice President of the United States under Roosevelt. And my mother was raised in that home. And she raised all 5 of us children with those values and those standards. Excuse me, about giving back and serving in your community. Of those 5 children, I'm the only one who has a love for politics and service in the community. My brothers and sisters just don't, and I don't know why it clicked with me, but since 10 years old, I have been involved in my community volunteering, serving the YMCA, what used to be Petoskey Gym, which is now the Boys and Girls Club of Las Vegas. The Veterans Endorsement, whether I get it or not, I'm here today because veteran issues are important. And I don't know how educated I am on it, and I need to be here today to know what's important as well. Would I like to have the endorsement? Absolutely, but what I'm more concerned about is becoming more educated. And I think if I put myself in a situation to list in my 40, 60 views, I'm going to be there to at least be at the table and fight for those issues.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our sponsors one more time. Ron Q for Clark County Treasurer, Michael Broadway Real Estate, Real Water, and Lakeside Business Suites. And that will conclude the interview for Nevada State Assembly District 4.
Pleasure's mine.
Yeah.
Thanks.